Cooper, and I'm the chair of the Fidalgo Democrats, and I want to thank everybody for coming this evening. Really appreciate it. We start the meeting with an acknowledgement. We, the Fidalgo Democrats, acknowledge that we gather on indigenous land, the traditional territory of the Coast Salish people, specifically the Samish and Swinomish people, and pay our respects to elders past, present, and future. If you're not on our mailing list, please sign up and put down your email and phone number. The sign-up sheet is in the back on that table there. And what we will do is we send out emails about our meetings. We send out a few emails here and there, but we don't send out a lot of emails, so you're not going to get lots and lots of emails, so you don't have to worry if you do sign up. And just to remind you to please write clearly, your best handwriting, so we can actually read it and put you on the list. Right, exactly. So, like I tell people, said by the person with the worst handwriting ever. But, and then I want to remind everybody to please turn off your cell phones, including me. The front door of the library is locked. And so if you want to come and go, you have to use that door or this door. The bathrooms are out there around the corner. If you need to use them, they're open. We have lovely cookies in the back, and one of our guests, Oksana, has made some lovely sweets for us, so please enjoy them and go back there. We have coffee and tea as well. Okay, I will explain who we are. The Fidalgo Democrats are an independent democratic association with a focus on education. I want to remind everyone that we are not a PAC. We cannot endorse candidates or contribute to their campaigns. We do invite Democratic candidates to talk about issues and legislation. If you want to contribute to candidates, we encourage you to go to their websites. And if you type in the name of any of the candidates that are running in any of these elections, you will be getting to their websites to find out more about them and to donate. So it's easy to do, even for someone like me, so feel free. We are going to do something a little different with fundraising tonight. Because we're not allowed to actually officially fundraise, we're going to ask people to, we're going to give any money that people might donate to us to the Sunflower Fund. And we're going to ask folks to go outside. They have a table set up, and you can donate money. You can also buy some of their merchandise. They have t-shirts and sweatshirts, so please do that. We'll take a break sort of in between and let you go out and do that. We were just told by the library that we shouldn't officially fundraise, so we're trying to obey the rules so we don't get thrown out. Okay, I wanted to let you know that Isabella Butler is going to be recording the meeting, and it will be on our YouTube channel in a few days. And if you're on our email list, you'll get a notification, and you can click on that. And feel free to share that with other people as well. So if you know somebody who missed the meeting but might be interested, please, feel free to send it out to them. And our next meeting is Tuesday, June 11th, and we have invited the Community Outreach Officer, Brent Lindquist, to talk about scams and fraud and how to avoid them. This is a really important topic, and he is a really good speaker, very knowledgeable. So if you or anybody else you know is interested, please come. And before we go any further, I would like to introduce Richard Brocksmith. He's sitting over there, and he is running for Skagit Commissioner. And so I've asked him to, say a few words about who he is. And the other thing is, if you want more information about him, You can talk to him at the meeting, or you can get on his website.
Thank you, I appreciate that. You hear me okay? Nice to see a bunch of friendly faces. Richard Brock-Smith. I'm running for Skagit County Commissioner position 2. So I hope you guys are excited about that. I'm going to do 30 or 45 seconds of who I am, because we don't want to hold up from the main program, and then see if you have a question or two. But my family and I live in Mount Vernon on the hill. I'm a research scientist by training. I've got a master's degree from the University of Washington in salmonid ecology, and I've been all over the western United States back in my day, chasing fish. But last 25 years I've been in Puget Sound, doing salmon recovery, working for the local tribes, and coordinating counties and tribes and nonprofit groups towards that end goal, doing voluntary things that are common sense activities. So I've really enjoyed that, so I could talk about that all day long. In the last 11 years I've been in Mount Vernon specifically, and in the last 7 years I've been really trying to focus on the housing situation in Skagit County. And if you guys look me up, or know of me, I've been the sort of leading housing obsessor on the Mount Vernon City Council for the last 2 terms as the at-large candidate on Mount Vernon. So I know an awful lot, I think, about natural resources, tribes, bringing people together, housing, homelessness services. I spent 4 years as the president of the Board of Community Action, working on homeless services and anti-poverty work. So my bona fides and the Democrat Party are pretty darn deep. So I hope that we have a natural connection. So if you have a question or two, but I'm going to be working my butt off for the next 6 months to try to put some balance on the county commission. I think we need that. I think a lot of people think we need that. So I hope you'll help me with that. Is there a question or two, or should we just hand the mic back off and keep moving for the night? Yes, sir.
Your last name again, please?
Brock-Smith. B as in boy, Rocksmith. And you can find me at richardbrocksmith.com, just like you would guess. And I started up on Facebook. I do want to leave some remit envelopes. If anybody is willing and interested, I could use a few bucks to help me get the campaign started off. So I'll put them on the back table. Any other questions? Maybe harder.
Well, who's in the position now?
The position is currently held by Peter Browning. So, yes ma'am.
And you will be on the primary here.
There will be no primary at all because only Peter and I signed up. So we'll be running all summer, and then we'll make one question in November on the November ballot. Hopefully you'll vote for Richard Brock-Smith.
It's countywide.
It's countywide. Everybody gets one vote on this race. Okay, thank you. Oh, Wim?
I think I have to correct you. You're in a partisan race. And partisan races always have a primary.
So this is an area of uncertainty for me, and I appreciate you saying that because I've been hearing different...
I didn't get clarification from the auditor. So, yes.
So I'll chase down that, and then I'll know. So hopefully I'm not spreading misinformation. Wynn, thank you. Okay, thank you. I appreciate your time.
I always want to thank people for running for any kind of legislative or anything anymore. It's so interesting and can be so difficult. So thank you for stepping up and doing this. Really appreciate it. As you all know, this is a big election year. Our state representatives for the 10th, Dave Paul and Clyde Shavers, and the 40th, Deborah McConoff and Alex Ramel are running, as well as Senator Loveland in the 40th. So all these races, as far as I'm aware, are going to have people running against them. So be aware of that, and again, just if you get online and want to donate or be participating in any of their campaigns, please know that you need help. The other candidate is Janet St. Clair. She's running in the 10th district, and she couldn't make it tonight. But I said she's running against an incumbent, and in the 10th district, that's going to be a challenging race for her. If you go on her website, she's great, but when she comes to these meetings, she's just dynamic and lovely. So I really hope that she can move along. So that is that sort of things. But before I move on, there's a couple of things going on. There's a gala. The Skagit Democrats are having a gala on June 1st. And it's at the casino at about 4 o'clock. And if you would like to come, you can get on the Skagit Democrats website. And if you want to sit at the table with the Fidalgo Democrats, you can ask. But you don't have to. We'd like to see you, but you don't have to sit with us. But we'd love to have you come. They have a lot of auction items, and it should be a really nice event. A lot of the candidates will be there, so you have a chance to actually meet them and have time to talk to them on a more personal level. And that's always nice.
You should probably say what it costs.
Oh, what does it cost? $100. Oh, I'm sorry. It is expensive, but it's cheap. It's a fundraiser for them. And if you look at what fundraisers are now, I mean, it's $100 is kind of getting scary, but it's cheap.
Well, it's a full dinner too.
Yeah, and there's food and
And I mean, it's worth $100.
yeah, and there's a lot of nice auction items and things as well. And the casino does a really good job. They're very good at this. The other thing too I want to mention is the Pride Parade, where the Fidalgo Democrats and the Skagit Democrats are going to participate. That's June 22nd. And if you're interested in walking with us, you can contact me or you can just show up. And we'll have our banner. And we haven't been, Sarah's taking a lead on this. We haven't been assigned a spot yet, but we will be. And it's always really fun. And then it ends at Causland Park, and we'll have a little table set up. And Corinne and Rosemary are going to man the table for us.
When is that again?
It is June 22nd, which is a Saturday, and it's we line up at 10 and it starts at 11.
And it would be really great to have some people join us. We, got this banner, but, maybe a half dozen people.
Right.
And it would be great if we had more of a showing. And,
Right.
And if any of you have gone to the Pride Parades, the audience is just wonderful.
Yeah.
Really, very welcoming, really fun.
Yeah.
And they say, yay, Democrats!
Right. Yeah, you get a lot of positive, and watching all the people come is really fun as well, because a lot of people really dress up, and it's really a really fun event. The other thing is we walk in the July 4th parade, and again, the Skagit Democrats and the Fidalgo Democrats, so if anybody wants to come and join us, there it's a little trickier. They don't assign us places, so you have to kind of walk up and down to find us. But we will be there, and we'll have our banner, and hopefully, again, if people have a few minutes, they can join us. And we line up at around 10 or a little earlier, so that's another event.
So all that information is going to be in the email?
Yeah, well, we've been sending out, we sent out, I think we already sent out an email on the gala, and so you'll have a separate email on some of this. Like I said, we try not to send out a ton of emails, so Rita might list them all at once, and we've done that before for the summer. I'm just going to say, are there any elected officials, Democratic Party officials, including PCOs? I know Rita and Sarah and Wim. So thank you all for all that you do, because that's a lot of work. And I also want to thank a couple of people. Don Ambrose edits the Skagit Democrats newsletter. Comes out weekly. Again, if you're interested in that, get online and sign up. It's a great newsletter. The guy is amazing. Every week he puts out all this information about what's going on. It's really, really informative. There's also a Whidbey Island newsletter with Carol and Rich Tamler, and that comes out monthly. And again, it's full of information, and they have speakers, people who, put information in. So that's another good newsletter. And Doreen Sadler does our Facebook. And I just want to mention that there is the ongoing rally on Sunday afternoon from 12 to 1 on the corner of Commercial and 12th. And all are welcome. And I see Caleb Sprouse is here. Thank you. He is the reporter with the Anacross American, and he's writes what I'm going to do is move on to the main program. So, if anyone has any questions about any of the things that I babbled about, please talk to me. And I have cards out in the back, so you can grab my phone number if you want to talk to me or email me. I tend to talk quickly and move on. So, okay, tonight we have, and I hope I pronounced her name right, Marquetta Borrell. And she's going to be doing a presentation on the Sunflower Fund. I'm going to read a little bit about it. It's a 501c3 nonprofit organization that funds critical aid to Ukraine civilians and their brave defenders. The fund sends 100% of all donations to Ukraine, usually within minutes. Since its founding in May 2023, the fund has delivered over $130,000 to Ukraine. The fund's operating expenses are self-funded by the sale of Ukrainian-designed and produced merchandise. And I'm going to let her do more of the details, but I was going to say a little about you, but she was born and raised in Czechoslovakia under Russian oppression. At age 14, she escaped her homeland with her family and spent 9 months in a refugee camp and arrived in the United States in 1984 under a political asylum. So, thank you for what you're doing. What I'm going to do again, ask you if you'd like to donate. You can go outside and donate money or buy merchandise that's in the tent out by the sidewalk there.
What's her name again?
Marquetta.
That's okay.
So she will introduce herself and maybe, give you more details about what you're doing.
Thank you, Barbara. I'm gonna go without the mic unless people in the back can't hear me. You're good? Okay. If I get quiet, just raise your hand and I'll speak up. Thank you so much, and thank you, Fidalgo Democrats, for hosting us tonight. I completely second Barb's mention of Caleb. He has been a phenomenal reporter for the town, and we are very, very lucky to have him. I say this because I read every article, but I do have to, for full disclosure, he has written many really good articles about our fund. So thank you so much for caring about the issue, and that goes to the rest of you. I also want to say thank you to my family, without whom I could not do this. They've been stalwart supporters of this effort for over 2 years now, and I'm very, very grateful because they've had to forego a lot of my time and attention and probably sanity, so thank you for that. And lastly, I want to give a shout out to Michelle, who can't really be here, but it is her birthday today, so she'll take your money happily and donate it to the fund. So, okay, so I will caveat my presentation with the fact that I just finished it and I haven't reviewed it, and I apologize for that. Life has kind of gotten in the way. So we're going to go Ukrainian style and go through this. My notes on this don't work, so we're just going to go with the photos. And I'll tell you a story first. It's one that I used to tell people last year when I first did the presentation. It's a story about a small country that was invaded by the Russians, and they came in, rolling in on their tanks, rolling through the streets of the capital, and that small country's population tried to resist. Unfortunately, they didn't have the backing of the West, and that small country was subjugated by the Russians. That country was my home country, Czechoslovakia. So when I saw Russians rolling into Kyiv and Irpin and Bucha and all through East Ukraine, it was very hard for me to just sit on the sidelines and not engage. And so I went to Ukraine last year. From that trip sprang forth the fund. It was the only way that I thought that I could make a difference, and I didn't feel like I could really in good conscience continue with life as before unless I did something to help. With that, let's see if this works.
Wow.
I named this presentation The War Paradox, and I did that because, to me, Ukraine is a land of paradox. It is a beautiful country with an incredibly well-educated population that is very, very advanced. It is a European country, and it is getting battered and beaten, and it is the site of the most horrific brutality that we have experienced in Europe since World War II. You see paradoxes on every corner. Here was just a short video from the balcony of our Airbnb. And this would be every night in Odessa. The alarms would go off whenever missiles were incoming or the Russian bombers took off in the south from Crimea or from the east. And for the most part, because it happens so often these days, people go about their business. And so you both have church bells clanging, you have music going on in the cafes down below, and then you have overlaid that with the sirens. So it's kind of an uncanny feeling. You do get used to it. And you realize that people go on with their life because they want to show that they will not be destroyed. They will not sit back and wait for their death. And I've had many Ukrainians tell me personally that they're going to live as they always did, or try their best, because that is the best way to show Russia that they will never give up. And then they usually say, and what other option do we have? We also don't have another country to go to. So that is why they fight. So again, going with the paradox, this was a few photos I took when we were going through Odessa. And some of the architecture, it remains gorgeous and untouched. Some of it, in fact, some architecture that was intact 2 months ago while I was there, no longer exists. Odessa has been under extreme bombardment from Putin. This is just one example that happened a couple of weeks before we got there. It's an apartment building. There are no military installations anywhere nearby. And you can see that it's the residential towers that got hit. And ironically, the one thing that caught my attention is in the second photo on the right, there is an electric car that's all blown up. Again, the paradox of they're actually really advanced with their electric cars and having chargers on the roads. But if you look way in the back, you'll actually be able to see a McDonald's sign. And the McDonald's was one of the first things that got repaired. And so the McDonald's is running right next to this thing. So, paradox. One of our members in the audience, and that is Oksana, and thank you for being here, Oksana. Oksana's from Irpin, so some of these images will probably look familiar to her. Irpin was a suburb of Kyiv, is a suburb of Kyiv, and it was one place that the Russians were able to get to. Kyiv remained protected mainly because of the bravery of the people in Irpin, and they suffered greatly. by defending the capital. They were one of the first people to stand up to the Russians. They were the ones who inspired a countrywide resistance. And when they were occupied, although shortly, as you may have heard, they suffered terrible atrocities. This is the graveyard of vehicles that were all over Irpin for months. As a result of the occupation, the Russians would go through and just throw grenades or take out artillery shots on civilian cars, and so many of them were abandoned along the roads. They've now been scraped up, and many of them are in this quote-unquote cemetery. The toys that you see in the picture on the right indicate a car where children have died. Irpin was also a target in terms of cultural heritage. And this goes to the fact that Russians not only want the land in Ukraine, but they want the Ukrainian culture and nationality to disappear. So one of the things that they do systematically is to attack houses of culture, theaters, opera houses, music halls, and schools. And we'll get to schools a little bit later. Because there's no better way to destroy culture than to destroy its education and subjugate its children. I have to say that each one of these stories is very personal to me. I've taken about 99% of the photos here, and I know the people. And the beautiful woman that you see sitting playing the piano is actually Oksana's sister. And she is the director of the Irpin School of Music, which has suffered greatly, but they have continued to provide education for the kids. They've never stopped. They continued running, except for a very short time, even while they were damaged in artillery attacks. And you can see actually with the scaffolding, they're repairing their school. It is an amazing place that has lost a lot of its students because they have fled to the west. And unsurprisingly, they're actually gaining a lot of acclaim. And the school remains full because there's a great migration of people from east to west as they leave the Eastern front lines. And so now the school incorporates all of those kids. And the one through line in all of this is their culture and their music. And the teachers and the kids, you can just tell on their face that when they engage in music, or art, they forget what is going on around them. This is another town we just briefly drove through, but again, in terms of a paradox, it was a beautiful town. It has been heavily shelled and bombed for the last 2 years, but Mykolaiv has a Russian tank cemetery in front of one of the most destroyed government buildings. And that photo of that building is very typical of what you will see, and I'm sure you've seen all over the news. Those tend to be very heavy F.U.N.D, 500, 1,000 kilogram bombs, and you'll see similar damage like that throughout some of the photos. And they usually deliver about 1,000 to 2,000 pounds of hell. I don't know, what is it that they deliver, Lauren?
What, those bombs?
The ordnance.
Oh, mostly it's laser guided, probably close to the equivalent of our 500-pound, 1,000-pound
Okay.
munitions that we carry.
Munitions. I've had to learn more about weapons than I ever wanted. Another town we drove through that had kind of a paradox right in my face was Dnipro. And we were there on Valentine's Day, and it was a beautiful evening. And we strolled through the streets, and these were the sights. One was a display of an old Soviet missile, because Dnipro was instrumental in building up the Soviet war machine. And of course now it's Ukrainian, so they just display the missiles. I thought the photo turned out amazingly well, considering that it was really well lit down below, but you can see the moon and Jupiter, so, and a missile. But walking through the streets, they were still filled with people, guys rushing last minute to get that last bouquet. And it was very sweet. Families and couples were out. The cafes and restaurants were all full, and that's with continued attacks through the night. So you can walk from a site that's completely destroyed as a block, like the one on top, and 2 blocks away you're walking through an intact city street where you would never know anything happened. Our next destination, as we were headed from west to east, was Kharkiv. I took these photos because they were very emblematic of many of the residential towers that I saw. And that was, they used to be places that were filled with families. They usually have a lot of space set aside as a park, and they have playgrounds. These days they sit predominantly vacant. They're very quiet. You hardly hear children playing there, so it has a very eerie feeling. This is a suburb of Kharkiv that was very heavily shelled from the neighboring village. Also, again, close to Valentine's Day, as I was taking those photos, I saw these 2 figures, and they were just striking to me. And it reminded me of the fact that, I consider myself documenting some of these things, but there is a very fine line between documenting and being voyeuristic. And sometimes I get that sense, I get, my heart skips a beat a little bit when I realize that. And I very rarely photograph or video actual people because they are victims, but you will see some of that in this presentation. I've been a little bit more brazen this time around. I took more risks, and for the most part I asked permission when I was taking photos that would have made someone uncomfortable. So these are all taken with permission. This is a building in Kharkiv that was hit just a couple of weeks before we got there. There were 10 people who died there. Of course, the attack was at night. This is an apartment building that's very typical of the post-Soviet construction or Soviet construction. Usually it runs about 5 floors, has about 3-4 entrances, normally consists of about 60 units, and they're all apartments, and you can see how when a bomb hits, sometimes it just shears off the side of the building, and you can see people's kitchens and sometimes what they had in their cupboards and how they decorated. And they are, a lot of the times, buried underneath the rubble permanently because they can't always be found. They're not always intact. So one of the things I felt kind of passionate about in Ukraine, in eastern Ukraine especially, was the farmland, because it reminds me of home. And the farmland has been essentially fallow or untended for the last 2 years in so many places across Ukraine, and essentially through all of eastern Ukraine, because as the Russians came in and occupied the territory, and they were able to get pretty far because there were no defenses in 2022 when they first came in. They took over the territory, and when those territories were being liberated, the Russians laid a hatched crosswork of mines all across Eastern Europe, Eastern Ukraine. So these fields cannot be tended because they're laid with anti-tank mines. And I'll talk a little bit about what happens to people 2 years in when demining efforts are stalling. Some of the things happening to farms is that they often get hit with the very large FAB 500 or 1,000 bombs. You can see what kind of a crater that bomb makes just landing on fertile soil. I'm standing in this crater. I'm sort of at the bottom, and it took me a little while to run the circumference. To point out the scale, all of those colored little tiny toys along the sides, those are very large combines, tractors, and farm machinery. There are millions and millions of dollars that have been lost to this war just for the farmers alone. So not only can they not farm their land because they can't access it, but everything is blown to smithereens. And it is a very ironic sight to behold dozens of John Deere equipment pieces just blown apart, laying the landscape hapless, and they're essentially brand new. They're still shiny. But here you can see, and this is not the same crater that I showed prior. This is another crater. There is really quite a few of them, and they end up just completely destroying everything on the farm. Usually the bomb craters, the bombs that crater the craters aren't the only thing that happens to farms. Those farms along that eastern territory get shelled very heavily, so there's just all kinds of artillery coming across, and that's all in preparation for the infantry, for the Russian infantry to come in and take over. So most of this land had been occupied, and so it's in pretty rough shape. Unlike some of the bigger cities like Kyiv and Odessa, Eastern Ukraine, as the countryside, tended to be a little bit more rural, of course, so slightly more out of the way. Perhaps you could even say maybe forgotten. It takes a very long time to get to some of these cities, these little villages and farms, and so the help is really slow in coming. Some of these places look like they were hit yesterday, and they were bombed 2 years ago. This here is a farmer who was maintaining one of the larger operations there, and he was so friendly. We asked him if we can look around, and he warned us to not climb on any of the equipment, etc. There's a lot of unexploded ordnance. There are some mines, although they've demined the places where the farmer walks. And I talked to him about that, and I said, well, so, you know, how did they demine it? What did they do? And he said, well, it was just a group of guys, you know, they came through, they looked around. So I said, so basically not demine. And I said, so what are you doing to demine the rest? And he said, oh, I'm doing it myself. To which I said, are you not scared? And he said, he looked at me, and he had these really pretty piercing blue eyes, and he looked at me and he said, girlie, what do I have to be scared of now? His house was completely bombed out. This is his backyard. These are his farm fields. So you can see the, you know, F.U.N.D tail ends of Grad rockets and Oregon rockets. Some of these still have unexploded munitions, but there are just probably thousands just on one farm from that sort of a rain of artillery. One of the unsettling things that you also see in eastern Ukraine is that it is largely ablaze. And that is because the farmers are trying to demine their own fields. They are not experts at this, but their fields are littered not just with anti-tank mines, but with anti-personnel mines. And what they do with the burn is to clear all the brush so they can see the anti-tank mines, because they know they won't detonate them just by the weight of a human. So they've kind of learned how to go dig them out and, you know, pull them off to the side and disable the detonator. The problem is, when the Russians were leaving, they put in anti-personnel mines in between the tank mines, the anti-tank mines, and around some of the brush. So a lot of times you'll have a large field, but in order to get to it from the road, there's, you know, ditches and some, you know, a tree line, and a lot of farmers die every day trying to do this exact thing. When I talk to them, they just say, we can't wait anymore. It's been 2 years. We are farmers. We can't go anywhere. We don't know how to do anything else. So we have to try to demine this on our own. In this particular town, and I hope this isn't too upsetting, I'll pause this. We came upon 2 farmers who had just died. And the first responders weren't even there. But some of the local policemen were taking control of the situation. It was kind of a rough day. I didn't expect to find myself here, so I think I sound a little bit freaked out. But somebody handed me the actual mine that they tripped and tried to explain to me in Ukrainian how to explain it. But this is the mine, and it has a small tripwire, and that's what the farmers don't see, is because when they burn the brush, the tripwire, which was more detectable when it was silvery metal looking, turns black with the fire, and it's very hard to notice it against the black soil that's also burnt. And so this is what's causing the farmers to lose their lives. These are mines that, again, I'm not a weapons expert, this is what I've been told. These are mines that don't just blow up and take off your leg. These are mines that come up about 1 meter off the ground, and then they have a circular spray of shrapnel, bullets, and what have you. So they kill everyone that's standing around the person who detonated the mine. So it's a very effective anti-personnel weapon.
Так, що це таке?
This is the mine that detonated while the gentlemen behind me were walking in the fields by their village. This happened about 9 a.m. I get yelled at in Ukrainian.
Замовлення.
So, I'll actually pause that and go back. We were
Замовлення.
actually able to follow a team,
Йдеш, бачиш, лежить,
get a
акуратно
lesson
його
in
подобрав.
demining in Ukrainian.
Так, ну, стежки убрав, щоб знав, либо на кучу, і все. А потім так само до тої палки прив'язуєш цей шашку, типа якось хлопці знищили. Ще раз.
So, a week later, we came back to the same village, and we just happened upon a demining team. It was a military demining team, as opposed to the teams that are just only designated to demining, like from the Halo Trust. And they allowed us, I don't know how we are able to talk our way into these things, but they allowed us to join them on a demining mission in this very area. And so you could actually see from the drone footage where the mines were laid in a checker pattern, and they were, yard by yard apart. And these guys are so experienced looking for them because they're all covered in vegetation, and they just walk around with mine detectors, and they hear a beep, and they put in signs, and then it's interesting because I questioned whether they would see an anti-personnel mine, and they told me, no, we know what we're looking for. We're not going on the black field. We got this. And so to watch them just cruise around and expertly ferret out these mines, and they weren't nervous. They were walking around whistling, and this guy, he was pretty funny. He walked around saying, "Kitty, kitty, kitty, here, kitty, kitty." And I think on that mission, in 2 hours, they collected about 80 anti-tank mines. And that's within a very, very small area. So when I talk to other teams that are demining, they all say the same thing. It's going to take them probably more than one generation to clear all the mines. Ukraine is now the most heavily mined country in the world. And there is just not enough people who can do this kind of work. In addition to the mines, there's a lot of unexploded ordnance in eastern Ukraine. There's a village called Dovinka, and boy, this tiny village, it was just a beautiful little farming community. It was right next to all those farms. And that Oregon rocket there, that is a common sight in almost every backyard. And you can actually see the swing set in the back. Again, no military installations. This was just a small village in a way. And it probably has about 10% of its population that remained or has returned. The woman pictured above on the left is a math teacher. And she never left her village because she didn't think that it was right for her to leave her students. In the end, all of the kids from the village evacuated. There's no sign of children, there's no sound of children in the entire village. It feels very haunted. And she continues to live in her house, which is half bombed. She has no power, no water, no heat, but through one of the organizations that we work with, we had purchased a generator for her about a year ago. And so she uses a satellite connection and the generator and her laptop, and she continues to teach all of her students who are scattered around Ukraine and the rest of the world. So different time zones, different continents. This woman does it from her kitchen. And that to me is what the Ukrainian spirit is all about. People make do, they figure things out, and they just do what it takes. And it is a cross of gender, age, and socioeconomic lines. Everybody is pitching in, as much as they can. Pictured below the teacher, is actually one of the organization heads who runs the War Crimes Investigation Unit that we support. And she is actually measuring the trajectory of the artillery that came in. It's important to do all of this work so that you can prove down the road that this artillery came from the direction of Russia, because as always Russians claim that this is Ukrainians bombing themselves or shooting artillery at themselves. And so all of this needs to be documented, and very, very little of that is going on out in the little towns in eastern Ukraine. Hurry up. I always have more pictures than I can fit into an hour. When you live under Russian occupation, the Russians first shell your village or town, and then they come in, and once they've subjugated you because you are defenseless and most of your homes are blown up, whatever is left, they take over the homes that are standing, or the nicest ones. They usually write that right on the front gate. This one particularly says, taken over, and then the Russian Z sign, just so you know. And they end up wreaking absolute havoc on the local populations. They get to do whatever they want, and they are encouraged to do whatever they want. This is not a work of a few bad soldiers. It is Russia's military strategy to subjugate, dominate, humiliate. They rape, they execute people, they take their children. You all know this already. I know this is an audience that understands that, so I'm not going to belabor the point. So just traveling through Ukraine again, this was once a kind of a vacation destination for people. This is what is left. There were quite a few residential buildings in small towns that I visited, and the Russian refrain is often that this is not them bombing the residential buildings, and if it was done by mistake, and they were aiming at some military installation. Or they claim that there were soldiers hiding in these residential buildings. And one of the things that is very important to document now, while evidence is still there, is that there were no military installations, and that there's absolutely zero military presence in any of these structures. And this work is actually not a priority for the Prosecutor General in Ukraine, not because they don't want to make it so, but they are busy investigating hundreds of thousands of horrific crimes like rape, torture, and execution. And there's not enough of personnel to go to these far-flung villages and do this work. This is one of the reasons that the Sunflower Fund supports the War Crimes Investigation Unit, because this war will one day be over, and we need to hold the people who did this accountable. This is a building, also very typical, 5 stories. And the Russians were able to, in the beginning of the war, fly over this territory. This is what it means to have air superiority, is that they can essentially fly over territory without Ukrainians being able to defend from the ground. It's also what happens when we don't send them aerial defense. And they will fly over a residential building, and they drop one bomb in the middle. They all know how these buildings were built, because Ukraine was part of Russia when they were built. The typical construction of the 5-story, 60-unit building is that it has a bomb shelter in the center, beneath. And just about every one of these buildings has one, and the Russians know that. So when they come and they bomb the building, they first drop a bomb in the middle of the building, and they take out its center. So they vaporize the 20 apartment column that's in the middle. That's how you get those weird-looking half buildings that you often see. And then they slowly come around and the bomber drops another, usually bigger, bomb directly above the shelter, the bomb shelter. And these are bunker busting bombs, you know, the kind of stuff that US used on Al-Qaeda when they were trying to get them out of caves. These weapons are being used on civilians with the intent of inflicting as much civilian casualties as possible. I have walked through hundreds of these apartments. I have picked up children's toys. I have photographed cribs and baby clothes and baby shoes. And I can tell you that out of every apartment I had gone to, there has never been one sign of a soldier having been in that apartment. And there were plenty of things left. And had there been soldiers, there would have been evidence of them. I've been in places where soldiers have been present, and you always find things that indicate a military presence. This is not the case. This is teddy bears, baby cups, strollers. This is just one little town. Again, paradoxically, here you have kids running around outside of this bombed building. They were flying by, didn't get a chance to ask if they had friends in there, but this clothing that looked like a, toddler size, that's still laying there. This building was bombed 2 years ago, and all these things are there. And the evidence is disappearing due to weather, and things are getting snowed on, rained on, and now the townspeople are really tired of looking at this, and they don't know what to do with it, and so they're starting to haul things out and burn it along the edge of town, because there's no help coming, there's no investigation that's going to happen, and so essentially the evidence is being burned. This is another building. This building somehow just really touched my heart. I spent a lot of time there. It had 60 apartments originally. 40 of them remain not in a habitable condition, but you can crawl through them carefully. And again, this was in the center below, and the Russian bombers flew over, dropped a 1,000-pound munition bomb, and waited. Most of the people by then had been in the shelter, but the pilots wait until a few more get in to hide, and then they come back around to inflict maximal damage. There were 52 people who died on that very spot that day. And again, some of them cannot be found because the damage to human tissue is, you get vaporized, that kind of power. So when I walked through this building, I would stand at one end. Yeah, there's me. That's to show that, that was my vantage point, and I was looking at the other side of the building, and you can actually see what people had in their, literally in their cupboards. And it's sheared off like some kind of a haunted dollhouse. It's just crazy to look at. And it's this life interrupted. You have that sewing machine up at the top and the TV, and then you go down, you see people's shoes and clothes and computer equipment, and it's just really unsettling because you see everyday items that we would have, and then you just see that life interrupted just like that. So this is a short video that I took from that vantage point, just to kind of show the damage as I was standing in the apartment on the edge. That was obviously not a survivable place to be. That's our drone, by the way. That was somebody else's, I'd be very worried. So yeah, I kind of try to get a close up here. And then I pan out because the building next to it, same thing, blown in half. And the one next to it, same thing. It is a strategy. This is not an accident. Every building along this route. So there's a story that goes with this video. It's kind of crazy. I posted this video on Facebook, and with just a little bit of commentary. And this was probably about a week before I arrived back in the States. And the reason this video kind of struck me as important is because it had that cup, and it was the only thing of that had any color to it. Let's see if I can get it back there. It had an English inscription, and it really struck me. Among all of this soot and blackness and rubble, this one cup. And so I didn't take it. I left it there, but I posted the video. And again, about a week after posting it, I received a message. And the message said, "That's my cup." And
It looks like it's in English.
it is. It is, yeah. And it was a cup. So the woman who saw this video, I don't know how in this universe, but she was at that time about to give testimony to the Czech Parliament about Russian war crimes. And she saw this video and reached out to me and said, "That's my cup. I lived in that apartment in Izium. I know all the people who died there. I know all the people who lived there." And I just, I thought it was such an incredible connection, and we since talked, and it's a cup she gave to her mother for International Women's Day the year before. And when Russians came to occupy Izium, they came on, I'm going to say March 4th, and the daughter left on, I believe, March 7th. And her mother wouldn't go. And this is very typical of elderly Ukrainians. You know, I've lived my whole life here. What am I going to do in the West? I don't speak the language. I can't get a job. How am I going to support myself? I'll just be a dead weight on you. I'm staying. Besides, we'll win this war. And so she stayed behind. And her daughter left. And the apartment was bombed 2 days later. And her mother died. Some of the things that I saw going through that apartment, again, it was just life interrupted in, like mid-sentence. Photos, fire-damaged photos of families at Christmas, Halloween, graduation. It was very uncanny. Again, felt very voyeuristic. Picking through these people's lives and probably being the first person to do that, and maybe the last. And I just felt like it was kind of my responsibility to make some record of it. These are all the toys that I came across. In this one building, out of the 40 apartments that I visited, 38 of them had toys or children's things. This little tank was interesting to me. Some kid, some small Ukrainian patriot made himself a tank out of the national colors. And that is a theme I've also noticed in Ukrainian children, and it's one that I probably can't really explore in this presentation, but I do want to talk about something that absolutely should not exist in this world, and that is bomb shelters for children. This is my personal pet peeve, and of course Ukrainians have to do this. But the fact that they've been in this war long enough to build bomb shelters for children is something we should not accept as normal. Every city, every neighborhood has bomb shelters so that you can run there when the city is under attack. Most of them have to hide children, and it's a policy for a lot of the kids at schools, even when the adults kind of go about their business, the kids have to go and hide underground. And so the adults have tried to make this as child-friendly and untraumatic as you possibly can, if you can even do that. And so you have these cute little animals, and you have Disney-themed shelters, and you have Hobbit-themed shelters, and they're very proud of them, and they should be, but it's heartbreaking. You shouldn't be going to children's bomb shelters. It's 2024, and just to drive the point home, on the left is a billboard that advertises, we'll do it all. Bathrooms, lights, and bomb shelters. And you can see the happy kids there on the picture. So it just stops me dead in my tracks, because these places are cute and they are sweet. And maybe you can hear it in my voice, but they make me very angry, because this should not be going on. And some of these shelters are very fancy. This one, for example, got a Warren Buffett donation, and so it's really well built. It has some cracks in it because it's in Mykolaiv, and it's been bombed all around. But that's where the kids go. They're very happy there, as much as they can be. And you know, to this day, most of kids in Ukraine aren't doing school at school. They're doing it online, and a lot of times they're doing it online from underground. This is a little bomb shelter under a school in Kharkiv. Again, you know, this is not one that got the Warren Buffett zhuzh, but it works. And this is one that is at our Women and Children's Shelter in Odessa. This one really just kind of gets me because they have no funding, but the women and the kids went in there and they've painted the walls. They even have classroom themed things that are on the wall so they can use it in mathematics and maps. But the little beds and the little chairs. With visual arts as well. I put that video in there because that classroom that they're singing in serves as their Sunday school and their afternoon program for the whole village. So our shelter actually takes in more children that live at the shelter. We provide the only bomb shelter for the village on our campus. And all the kids from the village, which is not wealthy and it's suffered greatly, they all come for art therapy and lessons and, you know, just to play. And so the juxtaposition of them being in this classroom, the bomb shelter is directly beneath them. So, I always get surprised because I don't have my notes, so I don't know where we're going to jump. But this is one of the bombs that the Russians drop on apartment buildings and farms. This one in particular was aimed at a dam, not the Kakhovka Dam, but other dams on rivers that you don't hear about that Russians have been bombing and destroying and creating havoc with not just infrastructure, but horrible ecological impact from millions and millions of gallons of water running through the dam, flooding areas below, and then emptying the reservoir and essentially killing all the habitat there. So it's those kinds of losses are so hard to repair and to mitigate. There's a little bit more here on infrastructure. I'm very taken with electric cars, and so every time I see an electric car charger, I'm just tickled. Well, here is one. You know, it's kind of a futuristic thing. They embrace the whole EV economy, and here it is, blown to smithereens in front of their bowling alley. This is obvious, doesn't need much explanation. And then on the left is kind of a typical gas station. This one is actually not working, but quite a few of them in eastern Ukraine have just, you know, cobbled things together. They put a whole bunch of sandbags up to, you know, up above your eyeballs, and they keep going because they have to fuel the military vehicles. One of the things that I also want to highlight, and our team from the War Crimes Investigation Unit was on the scene here. There are other photos I have not included because they're not really suitable, but this is a Russian double tap, and you've probably all heard about the strategy where Russians, this is Kharkiv, which gets pummeled daily, horribly. It's where the Russians hit an area and they wait until first responders arrive, and when those first responders congregate on the scene, is the Russians hit them again with more missiles or artillery, knowing that they are killing first responders, and that's called a double tap. One of the missions that I was going to go on last year got canceled because the head of the organization was killed in a double tap. He was an American serving over there, volunteering over there, and yeah, the losses are just staggering. These are young people, you know, volunteering for the fire department. And here is a school near Kharkiv. I include this photo because not just it was such a picturesque school, but it only stands as a shell of itself. It was the town's high school. It was absolutely beautiful. It's completely destroyed. And again, it's part of destroying Ukrainian culture and institutions of learning. I'm not the best videographer, as you can tell. I'm also not a public speaker or a good fundraiser, so I'm really poorly suited for this job, and I get mad. So, but do what I can.
Most of what you just said is demonstrably not true.
Here's some of the interior of the school, and it's just heartbreaking. And it, you know, a lot of these buildings just sit through the elements, so they just continue to deteriorate. Here's the school from another angle. This is a crater from a similar Fab 500 glide bomb that missed its target. Of course, the others didn't. You can see that in the background. And I was allowed to help measure the depth and circumference of the crater there. I was yelled at because I wasn't competent at that either. But be that as it may. Here again, another school that got hit just that morning, and to me, the kids standing there and just kind of looking at a school is that's sad and touching. you. You're leaving the best part. Actually, I was gonna ask you, Bob, did you want to take a break or do we want to slog through this?
Well, I was thinking if you finish up and then
I'll finish up. All right, then. Oh, boy. Yep. Okay. Let me just go through some of these. Okay. These are all photos of schools that have been destroyed. Just very typical. We find the same equipment that you would find in schools here. iPad minis and, kids' books and laptops, and it's just all blown to smithereens. Okay, this is kind of a tough one. Izium was occupied for 6 months. When the Russians came, they did what the Russians do. I'm not going to repeat that. They left the bodies of the civilians rotting in the streets for weeks. When that became unbearable, they made the locals go up and dig rows and rows of graves. So this is a mass gravesite. I included 2 short videos that I filmed on the spot. And I sometimes wonder if I should include them at all because they're very raw. But there's only one way that you'll get to see this the way that I did, and that is if you just get that first person recording. So I hope you'll bear with me because it will come up. But this is row after row after row of empty graves. Now, the bodies have been exhumed and they have been given proper burial because Izium had been liberated after 6 months of occupation. That's why these graves are empty. But they stand as a testament to what happened here. I visited Auschwitz on my way to Ukraine. And I think this disturbed me more, not because I want to weigh the relative tragedies, but I just don't have the background, skill set, the history, the mental schema to place this. I was taught about the Nazis. I was taught about World War II. I know what happened. So when I see ovens, it's still uncomfortable, but it somehow makes sense because I've learned about it. This, I have never seen, and it's just hard to explain. So there are some graves here, and I think I touch on this later. It's just macabre walking through this because some of the graves are empty and some of them have empty coffins, like this, just sticking out of the ground. And you're literally walking across and over, and it's not completely demined, and so you're trying to stick to, other places that people have visited. Little warning there to remind you to mind your step. And, again, the coffin sticking out of the ground. It's just very haunting. And I don't know if I touch on this in the little video, but yeah, there were 449 people who were buried there. One of the disturbing things is that the Russians had their military headquarters, their camp, right next to this. And so the bodies would actually be brought and lay there decaying while the Russians ate and slept and partied right next to these pits.
Today I have returned to the mass graves of Izium, a little town about 60 kilometers southeast of Kharkiv. The Russians had occupied this town for nearly 6 months, during which time they had killed over 1,000 people. 449 of them were at one time buried here in this forest. Their bodies, in the beginning, were left in the streets for weeks until it became unbearable, and the bodies were brought here to this forest that is adjacent to the town's existing cemetery. They were buried in these makeshift earthen graves and thrown in. It is overwhelming to be.
Something strange is happening. That's okay. We can skip over that one. I think my computer just gets too
Some of
fast.
the relatives went a little further than just bringing bodies here. If this was their family, they were able to actually mark the cross with a name and bury their loved one in a coffin, as opposed to someone who was just buried by, say, a neighbor and assigned a number to their grave. The white tape indicates areas that have not been completely demined. It also encompasses the crime scene. It is a very large area. It is haunting to be here walking across these people's graves. Many of these individuals were buried one by one in their own individual grave. However, at some point, many of them were also buried in large communal pits with their bodies just thrown in on top of one another. As I walk here, I will not be able to cover the scope of this vast area of the forest that has been dug up to serve as this makeshift burial ground. It is the scope and the size of this tragedy is absolutely stunning. It's very hard for me to process what I'm actually looking at. I recently visited Auschwitz on my way to Ukraine, and I actually have context for Auschwitz. I learned about it in school. But this, happening in 2024, I have no context for. It is rows upon rows, endless rows of graves. This is what genocide looks like. Let's not pretend otherwise. We know what is happening here. This is Putin's work. And these deaths happened during his occupation of Izium. Izium is like hundreds of other small towns in Ukraine, many of which remain occupied, many of which will eventually bear mass graves of people who were murdered and executed by the Russian regime. But we know this, we know it's happening, and it is happening on our watch. It is time for the American people to wake up and stop this.
Kind of rough, sorry. You've earned it. Palate cleanser. I normally have time to put some music to the dogs, but I ran out of it today. I survived a lot of this emotional stuff by hanging out with dogs. And there's tons of them in Ukraine, and one of our organizations helps rescue and evacuate dogs, and what else can I say? Dogs. They're fabulous, and some are very fancy, and they're very spoiled, especially the dogs of Kyiv and Odessa. And the dogs of eastern Ukraine kind of scrap around on their own. They live in packs. They congregate around some elderly person that's still surviving in a bombed out village, and they all just kind of hobble and clump together, and that's how they go. I am putting together a book. You know I am. And it will just have dogs. So, with that said, it is not all dark, and we can make a difference. And that's why this is so frustrating. When I was in Ukraine, it was still before our Congress decided to send the much needed assistance. And the mood on the ground was very bleak. And it was so different from the previous year, because last year Ukrainians were optimistic and they had reason to be. They had a successful counteroffensive, they were getting weapons from the West, they thought they were on a roll, and then it stopped. And the way I looked at my journey through Ukraine last year, and I named it so, Ukrainians had restored my faith in humanity. My journey there this year, and seeing what's happening on the ground, I would have to name my tour, our Congress has destroyed my faith in humanity, because the way that Republicans have acted. Every day that we did not send weapons or aerial protection for the cities, men and women and children were dying. Every day, needlessly. So we know what Putin will do, and there's not much we can do about him, but there are things that we can do to alleviate the suffering and to help the people of Ukraine. That war is still raging on, doesn't get the headlines anymore, but it's even worse than it was 2 years ago. The major cities like Kharkiv are coming under intense pressure and potentially even reoccupation. So, what do? We support a women and children's shelter, and if you saw me rushing here just before the presentation, I actually remember that this is being videoed. Directors of our organizations and the soldiers, they are all on Russian hit lists for when Russia anticipates to take over the territory again. So, these cute kids, they come to the shelter. Some of them, again, as I said, they live there. Others live in a village. But we supported the shelter to the tune of about 70% of our funding. We have funded their cars, fuel, equipment. We have repaired an entire well for their village so they could have water. We have repaired their indoor plumbing, their plumbing on their campus. We've helped with providing protein on a monthly basis, staples, you name it. It's whatever we provide to women and children's shelters here. Granted, these kids are a little bit more traumatized than sort of women. Some of those who we serve are very, very young. They've come from occupied territory, oftentimes pregnant, as a result of sexual assault by Russians. Rape is not something that they are willing to discuss culturally, and also it's just too painful. One of the things that we fund is mental health care for them, so they get the counseling they need. We fund their health care, prenatal care, and pediatric care. They do get sick a lot because they live in the same building, so we do spend quite a bit on keeping them well. The other organization we support is a frontline evacuation unit in Kharkiv, and they are incredibly busy right now. I was privileged to be able to go on some evacuation trips with them. They operate on bare bones. We supply them with cars, fuel and maintenance, because they drive on roads that are unimaginably awful to travel on. They're bombed out by missiles and artillery. They're muddy. Their cars get broken all the time. They had a picnic in the winter for us. This didn't daunt them at all. They had a full-on barbecue, which was incredible, went long into the night. They exist very bare bones. They have a headquarters on top of a campus that has a bombed out nuclear reactor. And that's where they live and work. They also support an Army foundation, and we deliver a lot of humanitarian aid to the soldiers. We've purchased hundreds and hundreds of tourniquets that save lives. We've purchased IFACs. We also help them with new technology, drone technology, defense technology, you name it. Our website has a lot of information with the details, so I don't want to keep you here to explain that. You've also heard me mention our war crimes investigating unit, so a lot of what you saw was some of their work, especially if it included drone footage. How can you support our work and Ukraine? Well, number one, donate. To us, this means that when you donate, we don't send things to Ukraine. We don't waste money on shipping. We don't send things they don't need. My first trip to Ukraine, I saw this inefficiency. People would send old clothes to soldiers. Well, they don't need fur coats or diapers. So, you know, there was a lot of inefficiency in that. We don't do that. We work with 4 organizations that I know personally, that I've worked with, and those organizations are boots on the ground. They know the dynamic environment. They know what people need, and those needs change constantly depending on the situation. So we send funds, and they deliver the help. So what else can you do? I'm not sure why that's not connecting. You can talk amongst your friends and dispel some of these myths that Russian propaganda spreads in our country and around the world. You should contact your senators and representatives, even the Democratic one. They need to hear from us that we support Ukraine. In fact, all of our senators and congressmen need to hear that it would probably be a good idea for Ukraine to be able to defend itself against Russia by targeting Russian military sites. It's not something that we allow them to do now, but just saying, since Russia is doing that to them and so much more. And if you share information, I very much appreciate it. I generally find that when I talk to people, they want to support Ukraine, and so I love to find more audiences. I have a laptop and I will travel. You can also join us on our team. Got a fun team. Our volunteers are great. Some of them are sitting here. Some of them are wearing our merchandise. And yes, you can also buy some of our merchandise. The merchandise helps us support the organization. It pays for the website and the promo materials, things that we need to do to run an organization, register it, etc., etc. Because every single dollar that we receive in donation funds, we send to Ukraine. And we do usually do that within minutes, either of receipt, we have a standing request, or as soon as a request comes in. I have yet to have a situation where I'm waiting for a request. I usually have a few of them in the hopper, and it's really hard for me to keep the money in the bank account, and I don't. It comes in, it gets paid out. There are other reasons to support Ukraine besides the fact that we're humans and we should support other humans that suffer. Putin is challenging the global order of freedom and democracy and international rule of law. And allowing him to succeed or advance in Ukraine has large ramifications for our own U.S. national security. I think this war is on course to alter the world geopolitical order for generations to come. And I think that we need to engage with that and not underestimate it. I also think that Ukraine will win, but only if we help. And with that, I leave you with a picture of Vlatka, who lives at our shelter. She is now a few months older, but she's an absolute darling. I have children, and if they have children, I know that I may one day have to explain what I did when this was happening. And I hope that I will have done enough. And I say good night from Kharkiv. That's it. Oh, I'm not sure why that went dead.
Yeah, it's been down for months.
I wonder why. I'm looking at a wonderful screen here.
That's really great.
I know. Well, before it was just talk, but now you're missing this whole video in Kharkiv. Oh well. Thank you so much for listening for so long. You guys have been great. Please let me know if you have questions. I'm happy to answer them here. You can contact me through the website. I don't know how much time we have left. You tell me.
Merch is on this.
Yes.
I just want to remind everybody that if people would like to donate tonight, they're outside and you can donate there. The other thing is I was told they're going to be at the farmer's market a couple of times a month and have a table set up, so if you do the farmer's market, you'll find them there. She said twice a month they got permission to set up. So this is a very, I don't know quite what word to use, but thank you all for coming. If you have any questions, please ask them now and we go from there. Corinne?
Is the Sunshine Fund based here in Anacortes?
Yes, Sunflower Fund is an organization I founded a year ago, actually. It's our 1-year anniversary. And I did that just so that I could sleep at night. And we've had a lot of support in the community, and with all of your help and some of our local organizations, we've sent over $135,000 to Ukraine already. And we hope to do a lot more. We need to reach out to outside places as well, not just Anacortes.
Yeah, if I could just make a comment about that. I've got organizations that I'm trying to get them hooked in. If you know any groups of any kind that would benefit, and I think everybody would, from this program or an abbreviated version of it. Also, most of this community, there's quite a bit of money here. Let's get real, okay? And people, if approached appropriately, will donate for something like this. And Marquetta is more than willing at any point to talk to anybody, literally, right?
I am,
Am I
yeah.
underestimating that?
No,
No, she's
have a
great.
laptop, we'll travel.
Yeah, so please don't hesitate to reach out to her and to her board members, because they also participate.
Well, the other thing is, she mentioned the political spectrum, if you want to contact your legislators and senators and let them know that this war is still going on, even though it's not getting the headlines that it did. That might be something that, we can do as Democrats and as citizens as well.
Have you mentioned joining the team or whatever? Are there local things that the team can do? I mean, I don't anticipate.
You don't want to go to Ukraine?
Well, I do and I don't.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, all of our volunteers are local, and so far the only people on the team who have gone to Ukraine is myself and Michelle, and she was an amazing partner. Yeah, so there's definitely ways to help, and we're trying to grow the organization, and it requires a lot of folks to pitch in on an ongoing basis. Good question.
Я приїхала з України і тільки рік живу в Anacortes, and I very thanks America, very thanks people of Anacortes, and get an organization about help to Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
I'm cooking Ukrainian cake.
Yes, not to be forgotten, there's some goodies from Oksana.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think there's not much else that I'm going to say, so I think I'm going to conclude it. Wiggy, thank you. Thank you for what you do.
Lots of merch out there, t-shirts,
Yeah.
shirts, get
Yeah.
out.
Amazon.
Go.
Good.